capital of the world. And along with that, all the violence and corruption, sin of every kind you can imagine. The violence was getting worse. The church was really feeling the pressure of what was going on.
Began pouring into Cali in the 1980s. The cocaine lords moved into the McMillan's upscale neighborhood, buying up entire blocks of luxurious haciendas, sending upwards of 1,000 tons a year to the United States and Europe. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency called the Cali cartel the largest, richest, and best organized criminal organization in history. With billions of dollars at their disposal, their reach was pervasive, especially in Cali itself. 1978. They were dismayed at the utter darkness that had settled over the city. But Julio was convinced that if the people of God would join together and pray, the enemy's grip would be broken.
Separately on his own, no one would join together.
Following a disagreement, Julio pulled out of the already weak Pastors Association. But even the macho drug lords were active clients of mediums and spiritual guides.
Had very strong roots.
Pastors felt God leading them to assemble their people for an evening of joint worship and prayer.
At the beginning, the problem was people saying, "It won't work. The people might not come." And many opposed it, but we had leaders that dared to do things. They dared, understanding that it was God's will.
In '95, we had our first all-night prayer meeting.
Did you feel the mountains tremble?
And they prayed against principalities and powers. They prayed for unity. They believed in God to see Him move in the churches.
The mayor at that time got on the platform, prayed for Cali and said, "Cali belongs to Jesus Christ." And with those words, when the Christians heard them from the city authority, that was a confirmation of what the Holy Spirit was doing in the city.
48 hours after the event, the daily newspaper headlined, "No Homicides." For the first time in as long as anyone could remember, Cali had gone an entire weekend without a single murder. A newsworthy event in a city used to seeing upwards of 15 killings per day.
After these major prayer events, united prayer events were going on, that's when we started seeing the results.
And 10 days later, the first drug lord fell. And God was changing the city.
Encouraged by the spiritual momentum generated by the first all-night prayer vigil, church leaders decided to rent the largest venue in the city, the 55,000-seat Pascual Guerrero Soccer Stadium. Their faith was amply rewarded when more than 60,000 believers showed up to pray and worship across denominational lines. During the summer of 1995, the Colombian government declared all-out war against the drug lords. 6,500 elite commandos were dispatched to Cali with explicit orders to round up the cartel's ringleaders.
There were 7 top drug lords. 6 had fallen in those 9 months when we really started praying together.
The whole spiritual atmosphere of the city of Cali has changed.
While Julio was encouraged by 20 years ago, Almolonga was a dark and dangerous place.
Suffered from poverty, violence, ignorance, and besides that, alcohol was the main problem. If you would go to Almolonga 20 years ago in the morning, 7 a.m., and walk the streets of Almolonga, you would have encountered many men just lying on the street because they were totally drunk.
We had many jails because there were so many problems.
Chief of Police Donato Santiago recalls that people were always fighting. Officials built 4 jails, but even they couldn't contain the problem. Overflow prisoners were routinely bused to a nearby city. Domestic violence was especially pronounced.
I talked to a woman who said that
one of the key leaders of Almolonga's spiritual turnaround has similar memories.
I was raised in misery. My father sometimes drank for 40 to 50 straight days. We never had a big meal, only a little tortilla with a small glass of coffee. My parents spent what little money they had on alcohol.
In an effort to ease their suffering, many townspeople made pacts with folk deities like Pascual Bailon, the Lord of Death, and Mashimon, a powerful patron saint.
Mashimon, he was the most important idol in Almolonga. When the Spaniards came to Guatemala 500 years ago, they found that the indigenous people, they were willing to negotiate certain things. But there was one thing they were not willing to do any deal about, and that was Mashimon.
Behind the idol held tenacious power over the people of Almolonga.
It's just a wooden mask.
Petitions heavenward. They were filled with a supernatural faith.
We told the Lord, it is not possible that we could be so insignificant when your word says we are heads and not tails. We kept fasting 3 or 4 days a week, and every Saturday we held a prayer vigil. And that was what I think opened the door.
People started to be delivered, men started to be saved and come to church. It was a tremendous, tremendous blessing. A revival, I would call it.
But the Holy Spirit's presence has not been measured by church growth alone. A walk through Almolonga's bustling commercial district reveals the impact of the revival's social transformation. Streets and buildings are named after biblical places. If foreigners find this public display of faith extraordinary, Mariano sees it as perfectly natural.
How can you say that you love God if you don't show it? Didn't Paul say, I am not ashamed of the gospel?
Where once Almolonga was peppered with bars or cantinas, 36 in all, now there are only 3. And as the drinking stopped, so did the violence. For 20 years, the town's crime rate has declined steadily. In 1994, the last of Almolonga's 4 jails closed. The remodeled building is now called the Hall of Honor. For Police Chief Santiago, these are the good times.
You don't have any jails in town now?
Ahora no hay ni una sola cárcel aquí en Almolonga.
No hay nada.
No, we don't have nothing.
Because you don't need them?
¿Por qué? Porque no las necesitan. No necesitan cárceles ahora.
No, porque no hay gente que cometa delitos.
No, because there's no people that do trouble.
Sí, ya no hay más delitos como antes.
No, not like before.
Even the town's agricultural base has come to life. For years, crop yields around Almolonga suffered from a combination of arid land and poor work habits. But as the people have turned to God, they have seen a remarkable transformation of their land.
And Almolonga became a fertile valley. It is so fertile that the land is so good. They produce the best vegetables. They get as many as 3 harvests per year. They sell their vegetables to Guatemala, south of Mexico, and El Salvador.
Before the spiritual turnaround, growers were exporting 4 truckloads of produce a month. Now they leave town 40 times a week. Nicknamed America's Vegetable Garden, Almolonga's produce is of biblical proportions.
You have to see them to believe. A beet is 4.5 pounds. A carrot is this size. It is just unbelievable.
It's bigger than my arm. Is that big? Bigger than my arm. It's the greengrocer.
Intrigued by the dimensions of these vegetables and the town's 1,000% increase in agricultural productivity, researchers from the U.S. and other foreign countries have come to Almolonga to learn their secret. But the answer is not what they expected.
The wisdom that God gave the farmers in Almolonga produced better crops than the scientific methods yielded. And
Kiambu was a town which had very bad history. In fact, it had the worst history in our country. The murder in terms of rape, violence, it was well known. This town was not growing. The churches were not growing. Because of the bad reputation of the town, nobody wanted to go.
By the late 1980s, this distressed suburb of Nairobi had become one of the most dangerous and oppressive places in Kenya. Bars and illicit stills outnumbered churches and grocery stores. Fueled by a river of alcohol, Kiambu's crime rate rose to worst in the nation. Nobody, especially women, dared venture out after dark. Civil servants routinely paid bribes to avoid assignments in Kiambu. Despite years of effort in this town of 65,000, no church had ever been able to grow beyond a few dozen members. They discovered that many of the things going on in Kiambu were linked to a powerful woman named Mama Jane, although she pretended to be a Christian and even called her divination house Emmanuel Clinic. Her business was pure witchcraft.
Assurance in our spirits. The spiritual power over the town had been broken.
Seizing this window of opportunity, Thomas conducted his was stripped of her power. Within weeks, she packed up and left town.
Once this power of witchcraft.
People used to be afraid to go out at night. Kiambu now enjoys one of the lowest crime rates in the country. Local bars have been closed and remodeled into churches.
The town has flourished. We have seen actual change. And with the presence of God, of course, there comes a lot of...
To get houses there, the population is up by 30%.
There's prostitutes, robbers, all kinds of people coming to Jesus.
As Thomas is quick to point out, the recipe for continued success
can do it in Kiambu. He can do it anywhere in the world.
This town was in serious trouble.
Lots of Satanism, witchcraft. We had the Moonies in the valley, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, TM, Transcendental Meditation Facilities, and Church of Scientology. We discovered that we were methamphetamine manufacturing capital of the West Coast.
There was a spirit of competition that reigned and ruled within not just the churches, but at the head of those churches within the pastors.
For years, this sleepy retirement...
The community's problems had an underlying spiritual basis to them, and the valley was very seated in cult and occultic activity.
Cults weren't the only problem. Neighborhood youth gangs had plagued the Hemet suburb of San Jacinto. At least 9 methamphetamine labs operated out of the area, each benefiting from the dry climate, remote location, and for a night of prayer and fasting in a nearby mountain cabin. It proved to be a powerful experience.
We knew we had touched something in the realm of
yielding impressive results. Cult membership, once a serious threat, has sunk to less than 0.3% of the population. The Church of Scientology is still present, but many other groups are burned out. Shortly after believers prayed for its removal, a brush fire started in the mountains on the west side of the valley. It burned only the TM facility.
We could camp out on Main Street where the bars are and just go from one fight to another, and taking people to jail all night long. And now that doesn't happen anywhere.
Police chief, professing fire chief, professing city manager.
According to Sonny, Hemet's drug trade has dropped by as much as 75%. He gives much of the credit to intercessors.
They took a multi-million-dollar drug corporation.
Be one of the laughingstock school districts where nobody wanted to send their kids to school in the San Jacinto School District. Now our students have some of the highest academic ratings and one of the lowest drug
millions, and it's changed the life of the church. It's begun to build a fabric instead of loose.
I've just been blown away by the number of people who have come, who have responded. This is something that just couldn't be done but with one church.